Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'm delighted to be with everyone. It's a great honor, and I'm just going to pull up, I hope, the right screen. Can everyone see the green in front of you? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. And I'm
good, although you might want to go to the presentation mode. I think you had.
I think I'm in it. Let's see. Oh, forgive me. I'm going to try one more time. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to stop sharing so I can do this one more time. I apologize. There's a little glitch on my end. We'll try it once more. I think this will be better. Here we go. So I want to begin with the title, which is Finding Gratitude in Difficult Circumstances. And this relates, of course, to the pandemic, the difficult extended circumstances we've been in. It also relates to the Torah portion. And the expression of gratitude relates to general Jewish values and, of course, the Thanksgiving holiday coming up as well. I want to begin with an image that I think says a lot here. Gratitude is obvious, and it's also very elusive. On the left, you see a baby for whom gratitude is the most natural thing in the world. It seems to be a default state many times, especially when we're in the thick of it. And then we all know when external circumstances change, when our mindset changes, when body chemistry changes, suddenly the bottom can fall out, and gratitude actually starts to feel inauthentic. Not just that we're not abundant and overflowing with gratitude, but that it would be a lie to express gratitude. And so it becomes difficult and, as I said, elusive. I want to offer this beautiful picture, and to go with it, this beautiful quote from Abraham Joshua Heschel. I think many of us know pieces of this quote. I want to read it to you now, and if it helps you to see the words to take it in, then please read along with me. And if you'd like to just close your eyes and let the words wash over you like a blessing, you can do that. To pray is to take notice of the wonder, to regain the sense of the mystery that animates all beings, the divine margin in all attainments. Prayer is our humble answer to the inconceivable surprise of living. We could say that about gratitude or thankfulness too. Gratitude is our humble answer to the inconceivable surprise of living. It is all we can offer in return for the mystery by which we live. Who is worthy to be present at the constant unfolding of time? Good times, bad times, the passage of time. Amidst the meditation of mountains, the humility of flowers, wiser than all alphabets, clouds that die constantly for the sake of beauty. We are hating, hunting, hurting. Suddenly we feel ashamed of our clashes and complaints in the face of the tacit greatness in nature. It is so embarrassing to live. How strange we are in the world and how presumptuous our doings. Only one response can maintain us: gratefulness for witnessing the wonder. This statement really arrests me today. I think so often we think that we have to maintain gratefulness. I've got to do my gratitude practice. I've got to say my 100 blessings a day. I've got to write my gratitude letters. But gratitude maintains us, according to Heschel. Gratefulness for witnessing the wonder can maintain us. Gratefulness for the gift of our unearned right to serve, to adore, and to fulfill. It is gratefulness which makes the soul great. So I hope that quote from the great Abraham Joshua Heschel is an incentive. I want to look to this week's Torah portion for some guidance as well. Torah portion tells us that Adonai saw Leah was hated, and God opened up her room, but Rachel was barren. And in the JPS translation, it says that Leah was unloved, but really Sinuah means despised or hated. she wasn't just the second choice between two sisters. She was no choice at all. It was the trickery of her father that caused her marriage to Jacob. And he reluctantly agreed. But she bears a son and calls his name Reuven, which means, see, a son. And, we all experience Mark's excitement over Adi's twin nephew and niece. But here, it's not that, look, a son. It's, look, Adonai has seen my affliction, and maybe now my husband will love me. And then her next son is Shimon, after the word Shema, listen. But it's not God has heard me. It's God has heard that I was hated and given me this one also. And then comes the third child, Levi, because this time my husband may become attached to me or may accompany me in life. For I have borne him 3 sons. And therefore we have the derivation Levi. And then she has a 4th son. And this time she says, Hapa'am odeh et Adonai. This time I will thank and acknowledge Adonai. And therefore she named him Yehudah, which means given thanks or grateful. And then for the time she stopped bearing. Another quote by Abraham Joshua Heschel. He says there are inalienable obligations as well as inalienable rights. Now, if ever we were to imagine that there is one time when we could feel grateful, and it would be an unmistakable, obvious time for gratitude, you would think it would be the birth of children. That then the mystery of life, the gift of life, is right there before you. But somehow, Leah gives birth to 3 children and only notices what she doesn't have. Now, I'm not dismissing in any way the pain of a loveless marriage. She was a victim of terrible cruelty by her father and by her husband and possibly by her sister. Yet she was blessed with 4 children. And she didn't seem able to take in that blessing. Nor did she feel that she owed God or the world or the mystery of life any kind of thank you in receiving the first 3 children as a blessed gift. So here's a question to contemplate. What happened with Judah that made her response different than with the previous 3 children? We could write reams of midrash about this, but I think there's an answer in the simple meaning of the text. She says, Hapa'am odeh et Adonai. This time I will give thanks to God. She made a new decision, set a new intention, and used new words. Because tough as it may be, no matter how difficult the circumstances, wallowing in misery tends to beget more misery. And finding a thread of gratitude tends to beget more gratitude and more happiness. Now, maybe you're the one who has the perfect marriage, the perfect spouse, the perfect boss, the perfect student, the perfect teacher. But if you're even a little something like Leah and you live with imperfect people and you are unappreciated or even sometimes oppressed or despised or dismissed, then you know how difficult it can be to find that thread of gratitude. I think we can follow in Leah's footsteps and say, just for this moment, at this time, I will give thanks for the blessings before me. And to the extent that we can do that, we can see what opens up for ourselves and for other people. Now, I want to go back to something that I shared actually the last time I was speaking at IJS, thanks to something that Mark said in the Q&A. And that is, he was talking about the question of gratitude, and I brought up in relation to his question the issue of Baruch Hu. And I'm going to see if I can, excuse me, I'm having a little technical difficulty. We are all missing ID these days. Hang on. There we go. So I wanted to show this slide of the Baruch Hu. We talked about it last time, that Baruch Hu et Adonai Barach can sound like a redundancy. It can sound like, let us bless God who is blessed. That's tautological. Why are we spending our time blessing what is already blessed? Hakarat HaTov, recognizing the good, is highly important. Tov lahodot ladonai. It's good to give thanks to God, first because it increases well-being. It feels good. And also because it's morally good. It acknowledges that inalienable obligation that we have. The word lehodot doesn't just mean to thank, it means to admit. We admit that we have received a lot of grace in this life. We acknowledge that we owe a debt of thanks. Now, one thing that gets in the way of feeling grateful are social comparisons. And we saw with Leah that she was comparing herself to Rachel as Rachel was comparing herself to Leah. One was unloved, one didn't have children, and each, of course, wanted what the other had. Why shouldn't you both be loved and have children if that's what you want? But this tendency to look only at what we don't have and to compare ourselves to others tends to lead to greater unhappiness as well as less gratitude. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out that we go astray when we start defining ourselves in relation to other people rather than in relation to God. And I love this very vulnerable, very beautiful quote by Rabbi Eliezer Diamond. Well, I am robbing myself of the joy of satisfaction I could feel in the life I am actually living when I covet what someone else has. Now, having said that, I want to acknowledge and validate that the difficult can be overwhelming. We have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves and each other. Yes, we're aiming toward gratitude, and we're going to do some gratitude meditation in just a moment or two. But we have to sit with and acknowledge, lehodot, that there are also great difficulties that can't be wiped away by a fake expression of gratitude. We're told that just because something terrible happens in your life, that doesn't mean you can't also be grateful. But this rule applies in reverse. Just because you're grateful doesn't mean your negative emotions aren't valid. So I want to acknowledge that from this very helpful and honest article by Sarah Benz. I'm going to skip this next slide and go to a few helpful quotations about how to hold the idea of gratitude with the reality of hard times. You have survived 100% of your toughest days. That can be empowering and encouraging. Even your worst day has a best moment. This can be very helpful when you're going through strife, tragedy, in the heat of the worst, to search for a little bit of sunshine, to search for a tiny flicker. What is the best moment of an admittedly bad day? And then I love the Christian writer Anne Lamott. Gratitude contains a heightened and amazed realization of how much goodness is marbled into our strange and sometimes hard, annoying lives. So, not pulling any punches there. When we practice gratitude, we shift our attention from what's wrong or missing to what is here. This is a beautiful intervention because it doesn't ask us to buck up, accentuate the positive, focus on what you've got, count your blessings. It says, what is here? What is here? What is before you is a mix. It's some great difficulty, some real tragedy, some terrible pain, and it probably includes some wonderful things to be very grateful for, some support in the midst of the hard times. So I want to dive now into the pool of blessing. I want right now, and I'm going to lead us in a meditation. take a few deep breaths, and you can gently allow your eyes to close or soften your gaze as we dive into the deep and buoyant and clear, beautiful waters of blessing. Take a couple of deep breaths. Notice the gift of air coming into your lungs, filling you up. Notice that as you exhale, what you don't need is taken away, another gift. And just make sure that your body is supported however you need it to be. Notice your feet on the ground, if they're on the ground, your sits bones. Notice how the length of your spine supports your neck and your head. Relax your shoulders and your jaw. Relax your belly. And on your next exhalation, just let the exhale go a bit longer than your in-breath. And relax. Continue to breathe normally. And consider, what are you genuinely grateful for? Not what should you be grateful for, but what makes your heart sing? What gives you joy? What do you feel blessed by? Now, these could be big blessings, blessings like a child or a spouse or someone donating an organ, but they could be seemingly small blessings like a favorite tune that brings a smile to your face, or the way your dog greets you with an enthusiasm that never wanes. Call to mind something now that is a true blessing for you. And see it in your mind's eye as if on an IMAX screen. It's huge and panoramic. And at the same time, you can see lots of detail. And you can even zoom in if you want. So what do you observe about this blessing? And having seen it as if on screen, get up close to your blessing and step into the movie. Be on site with it and use all your senses to savor that blessing. Maybe you can smell or taste or hear or touch. Really take it in. And imagine for just a moment how bereft you would feel without it. And then how grateful you would feel if it were restored as it is right now. Think of everything this blessing adds to your life. Consider the people and the divine forces that are associated with this blessing. Who or what helped to create or sustain this blessing? Who brought it to you? Maybe there are people who make this blessing even more precious because they share it with you. Hakarata tov, acknowledge the good that surrounds the blessing. Hapa'am odeh Adonai, this time right now, I will give thanks. Imagine each in-breath is breathing in the gift. And each out-breath is breathing out your gratitude and sharing it with the world. Taking in the gift, releasing thanks and gratitude. Now take 2 more cleansing breaths and let go of that intention. That beautiful blessing will be waiting for you later. And call to mind a blessing that you sometimes rush by. Maybe there are leaves on the trees that you were noticing for a while, and then they just became a little more muted or routine to you, and you don't notice them. Or maybe at the beginning or the end of your day, you rush through your greetings or your goodbyes to people whom you genuinely appreciate. Or thinking about the upcoming Thanksgiving, maybe there are parts of the holiday that you're planning to get through or rush through. I hope I can just get through that airport or that cooking or that cleanup or certain conversations. What have you been rushing through or getting ready to rush through that you could take time to appreciate and to savor? Let's take a little time right now. Hapa'am odeh Adonai, this time I will not rush by. I will acknowledge the God-given gift. Take 2 deliberate cleansing breaths and let go of that intention. You don't have to rush. You don't have to not rush. We're letting it go. I invite you to think of a tough time. A trial could be something from the recent times or from the past. Something serious or something lighter, but a genuinely difficult time. Whatever first comes to mind is good to work with. And just keep breathing. And ask yourself, what did you learn from that time? How did you grow from that trial? Without denying how difficult it was there any goodness marbled into this tough time? Hard as it was, did it bless you in any way? See if you can harvest a blessing right now from that tough time. Something you can notice and name to yourself. And if there's no other blessing, you made it to the other side, and you can honor the resilience in yourself as a blessing. Hapa'am Oded Adonai. This time I will give thanks to God. I will acknowledge the gifts and the mystery of the divine. Take whatever blessings you could find from this meditation. Let go of the rest. And when you're ready, gently rub your hands together and open your eyes. To conclude, I want to share this image of the gratitude audio teachings, which has the subtitle, Receiving Blessings and Giving Thanks. It's almost impossible to give thanks without taking the time to genuinely receive the blessings that are ours. I hope you were able to do that some today, and I hope you can do it every day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Debra Orenstein. A beautiful practice and perfect to help lead us towards Thanksgiving and this week of Vayetze. Friends, we seal our practice as we do every day with an opportunity for those in mourning observing yahrzeits to say the mourner's Kaddish, and for us to form a community of support for those who are, who I invite to rise in body or in spirit and join me in Kaddish. And if you'd like to share the name or names of those you're honoring today, either now or after we recite Kaddish, you are welcome to do so. Yitkadal, Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Yalma Debra Chirute V'yamlich Malchute. B'chayechon U'yamechon U'v'chaye D'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala U'bizman Karev V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach Le'olam U'lamei Amaya. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ar, Ramam, Naseh, Yitadar, Yitaled, Yitalal, Shmei B'kusa B'rechu, La'ela Min Kata V'Shirata, Tush V'Kata V'Nechemata, Ta'amiran Ba'alma, V'Imru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shamayim,
V'chaim
Aleinu,
Alinu V'al Kol Israel.
Israel, V'imru,
V'ayim V'imru Amen.
Oseh Shalom,
V'imru
Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Israel, V'al Kol Yoshvei Teva, V'imru.
V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thanks for joining us today. Thanks so much to our teacher for today, Rabbi Debra Orenstein, putting in the chat box the links we shared earlier to Rabbi Debra's e-newsletter, so you can see what she's offering these days, and also download of teachings on more teachings on gratitude by Rabbi Debra. I want to thank our sponsor for today, Donna Horowitz, for honoring Sam Feinsmith's beautiful teaching last week throughout our week of practice. And I want to thank everyone for bearing with me as I feebly tried to fill the shoes of Adi Stein, who holds our space every day so beautifully. You're welcome to stay on, of course, for conversation with Rabbi Debra about today's beautiful teaching. on gratitude. And for those who are leaving us, hope will join us tomorrow. Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein will be joining us from Jerusalem to lead us in practice. And on Friday, I'll lead us as we sit into Shabbat together on our daily sit on Friday. Please join us then or anytime you're able to. If you have a question for Debra, please put in the chat box or reflection on the teaching for today. And I'll try to keep an eye on that. A lot of multitasking here today. And thank you so much, Debra. I'm going to take a look at the chat, but I think that what I'd like to do is start off with a question about the relationship. You did mention, and was really important to mention, that we can have many simultaneous and apparently conflicting emotions, including anger and gratitude. And I wanted to see, I don't have the quote at hand right now, but I actually posted something yesterday on Facebook. I shared from my friend Rabbi Sean Zevit, a quote that he shared about the relationship between, or the direct connection really, between grief, our capacity for grieving, and our capacity for gratitude. That is, that we have to be able to live with letting go in order to be able to appreciate. So I wonder if I wanted to see if you have any thoughts about that. The connection between gratitude and grief.
Well, the first thing that came to mind is that I don't think it's exclusive to grief. In other words, I think you can't selectively tamp down certain emotional realities, expressions, and expect to be able to be overflowing and open with others. That's not really how it works. I think if you are successful in repressing emotionally, you don't get to choose. So that's, I think, a psychological reality. But in particular, the connection between grief and gratitude, I think, is very strong because they both have the effect of opening the heart. And I think that sometimes, that's why sometimes I mention, if you're in the most difficult situation, sometimes it's easier to be grateful then. You're in hospice, you're in a difficult illness, and somebody brings you an ice chip and it feels like the greatest gift in the world. And you're appreciative of blessings that we in our health rush by, like the changing leaves or the sunlight or the warmth of a blanket or a phone call that you might otherwise be annoyed by that's interrupting your day that you receive as a show of support. So I think when your heart breaks open, it breaks open. I used to be a counselor in the emergency room for rape victims. And one really remarkable woman who had just been raped said to me, why do you think God is so close to pain? And I think that is the answer, is that our hearts are open. And it's an awful reality of grief, but it's something real. And the good news is we don't have to wait for that. We can deliberately open our hearts in a lot of circumstances to positive things as well.
I know there was also a question of people, so it's remarkable and I think very significant. And I'm grateful that you brought up that the word Yehudi or Yehudit, Jew itself, derives from that root of gratitude, which is kind of striking for people who are mostly known for our fetchiness, right?
Well, we got
make of that.
We got both built into our spiritual DNA. We've got the murmuring and complaining of the desert that sucked Moses dry. We've got very good pedigree for fetching and complaining. And we also have this commitment to gratitude. That Zeh Hayom Aseh Adonai, this is the day God has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. I don't think that was a reflection of the fact that every day was sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns for David. That's not what the Psalms are about. But it's a commitment that even in the face of difficult times, even in the face of enemies, threats, etc., I'm going to make this commitment. I want to be the kind of person who can praise and thank and not wait for all the circumstances to line up before I feel grateful.
Here's the actual quote. I'm going to put it in the chat box. This is a quote from, I'm not actually familiar with this person. Maybe others are. With Francis Weller, psychotherapist, who wrote The Wild Edge of Sorrow, Rituals of Renewal and the Sacred Work of Grief. I just was very taken by this quote. The work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched large by them. How much sorrow can I hold? That's how much gratitude I can give. If I carry only grief, I'll bend towards cynicism and despair. If I have only gratitude, I'll become saccharine and won't develop compassion for other people's suffering. Grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which helps makes compassion possible. Just think that's quite powerful, at least in my experience. Also, I think true. Here's the thing about it, that the quote from Heschel, which is such a fantastic, could spend the whole time just reading and rereading that and unpacking it. He speaks about wonder and mystery, which is really, in a sense, it's about, or the incomprehensibility of being, I think. Is that the term? Is that the phrase? Or
inconceivable surprise.
Inconceivable surprise of living. Okay. Right. That's a great phrase. The inconceivable surprise of living. That there's something about having a sense that the transients are transients, watching life unfold, and know that we in this incarnation at least are only part of it, are part of it, has both heartbreak, that there's impermanence, and also wonder. So I think I speak with this because some people here familiar with the Midot work that I teach know that for me, I struggled with feeling, I have struggled with feeling like someone who is ungrateful. And I came to realize that actually I was afraid to feel grateful because that which I am grateful for, ultimately I'm going to lose, that everything passes. You can't hold on, you can't hold it. So that was the sense of the grief. That's how I understand this quote, that the extent to which I am willing to, hold with open hands, as Milton Steinberg described it, right? Be able to let go and experience the grief of loss. I can also experience gratitude at the same time. For me, that was very helpful because otherwise I know that I have kind of a visceral reaction about gratitude, like, yes, I should feel grateful. I have like more than a million reasons to feel grateful. So why is it hard? Why is it a challenge to feel grateful? Maybe you can speak to that part, like for people who say, I have a hard time people could say I have a hard time feeling grateful because they're going through a really hard time. And I think you addressed that beautifully, with some of those quotes. But what do you think? What do you say for people who struggle with that?
Well, a few things. One is the middle part of the meditation that I did was on rushing. Because I think even though complaining is typically seen as the enemy of gratitude, I think also rushing and failing to pay attention also are inimical to gratitude. Yeah. And our world is full of so much distraction and so much rushing that I think that gets in the way of feeling grateful.
Yeah.
So that's I think part of the cure or the something antidote that can be helpful. Right. So a little bit of an antidote is to slow down, to connect, because gratitude is often found in relationship and in acknowledging others, that kind of benzoma attitude. I was referencing, a famous quotation from the Talmud. Think of how many people were involved in bringing you whatever gifts you have today, sitting where you sit, wearing the clothes you wear, who constructed the building, what delivery people, what weavers, what loomers, all the different things. And we became more aware of it during the pandemic and the disruptions in delivery and so on. What are all the blessings that come together, all the people, the forces that bring you that awareness, that slowing down to acknowledge and to even see all the different elements that come together. And attending to that, I think, can be helpful.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, that's contemporary society, like you said, supports the rushing. And the other thing it supports is the comparative mind, which you referred to also, right? That, people are familiar with this idea of compare and despair, which really it's like inimical to gratitude, and yet inevitable. That our mind does. We have an aspect of our mind that is inclined towards comparing, and it can serve a function. So maybe we can close with this, just to speak to that a little bit. Like, as when people notice themselves, no matter where they are in their lives, comparing themselves with others, which of course are pretty much our whole economy is built on, is how might we meet that? How might we meet comparative mind?
Well, one way is to take the broader perspective and to not see the other as so other. And I saw a great example of that in you, Mark, today when you were talking about Adi. Adi's, your reaction wasn't, Adi's taking the day off, so I'm saddled with all the tech. Your reaction was,
you read my mind.
Wonderful?
How did you know that?
Well, I'm sure the passing
no.
cloud, but the larger reaction was, isn't it wonderful? Twins, a simcha, b'shah tova. This is the opposite. Reb Zalman used to teach. There's a begrudging. It's, if you think of there's sort of whole, if you can imagine sort of seeing others neutrally is in the center, and then there's begrudging. But on the other side, there's forgetting. There's no English word for that, but that's the Yiddish, where you take joy in other people's joy. And you don't see it as, well, they got this, so I didn't get that, or they have this and I don't have that. But you see it as a collective, and you can really love your neighbor as yourself in that way and take joy from what they have. It doesn't have to be my gift for me to love it. I go to a museum. I don't have to own all those paintings in order to take joy in them. So I think there's more unity, there's more community, there's more togetherness that will help people. And then I think also the last thing I would add is thinking about this in an embodied way. Think about where you feel gratitude in your body, when you have experienced it, what were you doing with your posture, with your breathing? What were you noticing? How wide were your eyes? What were you paying attention to? And to think of it in terms of the quote that you shared, Mark, as a capacity, that just as grief expands your capacity for compassion, joy expands your capacity, gratitude expands your capacity. Anything that pushes you to be bigger than you've been is expanding your capacity for all things. And so you can even, in that sense, harvest the blessing from your grief.
That's lovely. That's really lovely. All right, we are actually a little bit over time, but thank you so much, Debra, for being so generous and for this beautiful teaching on gratitude for the season. And I'm going to put, those who might have missed it, the link to the slideshow that Debra, with all the wonderful materials and quotes that Debra shared during the teaching, is there. I want to thank Donna Horowitz again for sponsoring our practice today. And most of all, thank you, each of you, an opportunity for gratitude. Grateful to each of you for showing up day by day and engaging in practice and supporting this community of practice. And we hope to see you tomorrow to practice with Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein. Be well, everybody.